Hello, Cardstack community. My name is Chris C. I'm the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, I'm so delighted to be joined by Unlock CEO Julien Genestoux, who's going to talk to us about the amazing ability to use NFT to unlock the potential of not only Web3, but experiences and relationships. So Unlock Protocol, super excited to have you to be here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited and delighted to be telling you the story about Unlock, and then hopefully people find this interesting.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting about Web3 is that we call it different things, crypto, Ethereum, and blockchain, whatever it might be. But the idea of the day is about adding a dimension of ownership and composability. And that's the thing that I think that is more meaningful to me, and making that the new substrate of the web. Web3 is not a different web. It's just the web with an additional component. And one of the additional component is this idea that these tokens, these abstract 0x addresses somehow represent something real, that real access pass, that real permission and belonging, and maybe not entitlement, but certainly a sense of that you belong somewhere. So tell me a little bit about kind of like how you came into this world we call Web3, and what made you push this envelope on Unlock and this potential of building this kind of relationship between people and actuating it.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm a software engineer. I'm a hacker, and I've been building stuff in the open web for the last almost 20 years at this point. My previous company was doing RSS feed APIs, and I hope people who are technical know RSS feeds, but this is basically, in my mind, a tool for Web3 in some way. It's kind of a way to syndicate content from many different places of the web into a single place, or the other around. Have the same content go in many places through syndication. I do believe that the web was built, with a lot of very good intention in terms of openness and decentralization. But for one reason that maybe we'll come to it has become more and more centralized. We've given more and more of the power of decentralization to a small number of entities. Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, like these names probably ring a bell for everyone. And I think this all, comes down from a single event, from what I call the original scene. And it's actually an HTTP status. So people pretty know in your community what HTTP statuses are, but like the most famous that everybody knows of is 404 not found. And believe it or not, there was a 402 status called payment required. And if you look at the HTTP specification from 93, I think, there is still this status 402 payment required. And the specification says only three things: reserved for later use. And that was never implemented. And I think that's the original sin. That is what actually made the web more and more centralized. Because at some point, these, fun little website that we built in the 90s and more people built in the 90s and further needed to monetize. And when they needed to monetize, well, they couldn't do that at the protocol layer. They couldn't do that at the lowest level because there was no payment mechanism on the web. And we'll come back to this. So they invented, the banner ad, for example. They invented a mechanism at a higher level to say, okay, if we can't actually monetize in the low level, we'll have to sell our users' attention. And from there stems a lot of the things that are not great about the web today, like these, constant attention-grabbing techniques that you'll find on all the social networks. I don't want to go into like how YouTube and TikTok do that, but it's kind of a pain. The erosion of privacy. Like the fact is, ads do convert better when they know more about you, or arguably they convert better when they know more about you, which means that now tons of people are incentivized to get everything they can from you, like what's the age of your children, where you live, what degree you can have, what website you browse at night, etc., etc. And so that stems from that idea as well. And in practice, the fact that it was actually so hard to be paid for most creators on the web meant that a smaller and smaller number of platforms who were able to actually build efficient monetization schemes were able to capture all of the content, all of the traffic, and all of the attention from everyone. And so I think what brought me to Web3 is really the idea that, hey, we can do better. We should do better. We've had Web 1, we've had Web 2 with, the social web. Let's actually now go back to the roots and try to see how we can leverage this emerging technology, which is blockchain, that actually brings payments as a primitive to the web, and see how it can help us reinvent the whole stack altogether.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that that's the missing piece of the web was the payment piece, because a lot of things got right, but there's this one missing thing, and it's really hard to do payment processing, right? There's a lot of success story of doing payment processing, where that's Square, Stripe, or originally PayPal. Like these are pretty important patchwork that we built on top of the really antiquated financial systems.
Yes.
And then it's like, so right now with the technology that we have, and I think most of the people who listen to the podcast generally knows, like things like MetaMask or the ability to think. I actually think this idea of MetaMask is pretty interesting, right? It's like this injection of the missing piece of the payment required into the context of the web without introducing a centralization. So yes, they use an inferior server, but it could be arguably any other server that you're going to use as a node.
You can use any RPC provider. I actually use a local RPC provider in my MetaMask.
Smart.
To give an example. I mean, I don't know if it's smart. One of the things that I believe a lot is the idea of dogfooding. Is like, I can preach for something. If I don't do the thing that I'm preaching for, then I'm not credible. And so as I'm in the Web3 space, I'm trying to use as much as possible a lot of Web3 tools. But anyway,
the fact that it's possible, yeah.
No, exactly. I think you're right. Like the MetaMask approach, I actually never thought of it like this, but like injecting itself at the core of the HTTP layer, which is in the web browser, almost in between, the rendering of the page and the network, is actually a very relevant point here. I do think that what's interesting about that is, like, if you think about Chrome, forget about MetaMask, right? Safari, and even I think Mozilla had a project called Persona at some point. All of these vendors try to at some point build an identity layer inside of the web browser. But they did this in a very centralizing way. Obviously, this was an Apple ID account, and so it's with Apple. It's not something that is self-sovereign. It was a Google account actually inside of Chrome. It was not something that is self-sovereign. So what MetaMask does is just saying, hey, you know what? No, your identity is your private key. Yes. It should be that. And so we're basically injecting ourselves into your browser as a way to say, hey, if you are this person, you can prove that you are this person to a website and use that as a mechanism to make payments for sure, but also log in. And that's the whole sign in with Ethereum pattern that we're seeing more and more of.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, when you look at the cryptography as a field, there's many attempts to bring cryptography to the masses. Like PGP was one of the first way to, encrypt your email. And there was other things where it's a little more centralized. The SSL thing took a lot of time. There was a provider was like, check your like state registration certificate to give you a $5,000 certificate. And then it's like, we just want encryption. And I think we got better. But the point is, it's actually really amazing. If you look at Ethereum and then other ecosystems that also use public, it's actually the first majorly usable cryptography system that is in the masses ish.
Yep. Yeah, when I started playing with Ethereum almost 6 years ago now, 5.5 years ago, a good friend of mine who I was on the journey with told me something like, even if this whole thing fails and collapses and disappears, at least we'd have made private keys popular. Yes. And I think that's actually one of the big things. I don't think this is going to collapse in any way, but yes, we have finally moved away from this idea that your identity needs to be managed by some third party, some government, some large website, to a world in which, nope, you can have your own identity and prove to everybody else that you are wherever you claim to be without having to rely on somebody else giving you that permission. And to me, that's kind of already progress in that way.
Yeah. So, I want to jump kind of straight to what this unlocks, no pun intended, which is like, if people can prove the identity and sign in with Ethereum and say, this is my key and this is who I am. The next thing to ask is, and especially new users who are curious about Web3, more so in a time where things are frothy, but, even so today, people are asking those questions, what can I do with this? Right?
Yes. So once I can prove to you who I am, I can prove to you what credentials I have, what I should be able to access, what kind of content I should be able to see. And going back to the thing about the attention economy, I think the web is also moving away from that attention economy to what I call the membership economy. We're all familiar with Substack. So, I mean, I sold Superfeeder to Medium, the publishing platform, and at Medium, we say, okay, we'll democratize publishing, we'll make it easy for people to publish. But one thing that we missed, and I think Medium is now going there, is like, okay, the next step is like for all of these creators to monetize their content, just not distribute it, but being able to say, I'm going to make money from this. And so we needed a mechanism to allow to identify whether a user was paying or not for the content, to show them the content. And that's what Substack does at its core. New York Times, we're both in New York, moved away from an ad-only business model, which was kind of early 2010s, to something that is subscribers only. I know there's a ton of criticism about this, but they're getting to 10 million subscribers and making it a very large tech company in practice with a lot of subscribers.
I feel like they have changed. I think they've actually crossed the inflection point of ratio.
Yes. Absolutely. No, I think they're now at 65 or 70% of the revenue coming from subscribers. Yeah. But it goes beyond this, right? Like, you can think of Netflix, Spotify, they're all, we're pretty the same age, or roughly. We downloaded all of the music in the world and all of the movies. We're not paying for anything.
Yes.
Now I just pay for Netflix. I just pay for a bunch of other streaming services. I pay for music. It's the convenience. It's practical. And now these services have an easy way to identify whether I'm a paying member or not. Yes. They have a database. My hunch is like the web is doing this migration, and we'll have more and more, members only interfaces. It doesn't mean you're going to have to pay for everything, but you need to be able to prove that you should be able to access some things. And
Twitter Blue with the new subscription based thing, that's kind of like one step to that
exactly
direction.
Like that. Yeah, I mean, it's step in the direction. If you want to go even further, Instagram has this, super follows, I think it's called. So your close friends, where you can publish, on your Instagram feed for the people that follow you. But then there is this section called close friends, and I think it's limited to 150 people, and you can send them messages. And I know there's some Instagram, influencers that are actually selling access to that list. So that's the same pattern. It's like, okay, I'm a famous person. My biggest fans, they're going to pay to access this content that I'm going to publish to them. So really the web is moving to that direction. But right now it's doing this in a very disorganized way with, every website uses a different authentication mechanism. I have to email password everywhere, different payment platform everywhere. What if, and that's the Web3 answer, what if my wallet was my identity? I can log in with my wallet and prove that I'm wherever I am. And then my access keys, my membership cards are actually NFTs. They're non-fungible token that I can acquire or can earn by doing certain things to access, a website, access an online community, maybe get some discounts or benefits on some e-commerce site, etc., etc. And what's really interesting about using NFTs here, or using a blockchain, as a matter of fact, is like it's a different dimension from the web. It's not stuck in a specific database. I don't know if people are going to see the video here, but at the bottom of my webcam here, I use a virtual webcam. I've got a bunch of little icons. These are my fans. I mean, maybe fans is a big word, but they're my members. I've got a membership on my own blog. It's using Unlock, obviously. All of these people have an NFT membership that allows them to access some of the content. And then since it exists actually inside of a database, not inside of a blockchain, instead of a database, I can leverage that information wherever I go online. And so I use this virtual webcam to extract the list and just overlay a few of them on my calls.
Yeah, it's really interesting about data portability, right? Because even in the Web3 sense, there's two ways to do data portability. One is like, hey, it's an API access to a partner, as long as it benefits them. And the moment it doesn't, I'm going to shut down the API. It's gone, right? So that's the platform risk that we always warn first-time founders on that. But there's an API, it's like only when you're not successful and you help them a little bit. But if you start overtaking them, it is like you call it back, poop. Like, and the second thing is like the type of patronizing download your data thing, right? Like, which is like, what am I going to do with the zip file of HTML files on my computer?
I think we've done the same thing with the Facebook export. Yeah, when Facebook came up with the export, it was actually in 2013, and they're like, oh, you can download an HTML file of these things. Like, what kind of joke is this? Like, nobody can do anything with that. It's, for me, that's actually almost kind of a misconception around data portability.
Yes.
It's like, no, data should be portable. It should be accessible.
Yes.
And portability doesn't actually mean anything because it's not easily syncable and it's not easily programmable. If I download an HTML file, I cannot do anything with it. And the point of Facebook is not to be just a dead thing. It's something that should be static and programmable. And so, yes, for me, the right way of thinking about this is like, instead of saying, oh, you can download the data, it's like, no, the data is available on a shared public space where I cannot cut you access from, where you can access to it. There are maybe rules in terms of like how you can access, and maybe there's encryption and things like this to make it secure, but it shouldn't be, behind a server that can, or terms of service that can evolve and maybe shut you down. And we've seen Twitter, we talked about Twitter, do that, 7 times over the last, 10 years.
Many times. They would have a mea culpa and then do it again.
Yes. And then, but it's not just them, right? Like Google shuts down APIs left and right every year. And all of the small businesses that are built on this. Apple just shut down Dark Sky, which was one of the most amazing weather APIs in the world. And so sad. All of these things, sad, but at the same time, it's like, who could have known? Well, us. We should have known. And there's people that actually have, warned us over and over, and they keep warning us. And, every week I see, I'm going to build this on that API. It's like, I mean, good for you, but that's not a sustainable business.
Yeah, it's parasitical in the way that you have to think, right? You have to help your host, but not kill it and not threaten it. That symbiotic thing is hard to do. Like, for example, I think the company who had the most access key to all the services is Zapier. Like Zapier or this kind of thing, because they are just useful enough to like kind of let off some steam and say, hey, you're trapping my data, but you can use Zapier. So that nobody ever shuts down Zapier, right? Because that's nice. But Zapier can't build an alternate UI to unify all the application they have keys to. They would get shut down immediately, even though I'm sure they've thought about it, right? Why do you have to go and use all this different UI to connect them? But they can't.
I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that there is some services that have asked Zapier to remove some of the receipts so that they wouldn't sync the data. Like, I'm sure there's like people that have built sync your data between Twitter and Facebook. It's like, in either Twitter or Facebook, I say, nope, Zapier, you either remove these receipts and you do only the thing that we approved you for, or you don't actually have anything.
Stay within the line of what's acceptable in the service. And whereas I think there's a lot more opportunity in a more open world to push. I have I recorded a video called why use Web3 tools, and it came down to two words, and it has to be both simultaneously true. It has to be ownable and composable. Ownable is just it's yours and nobody can take it from you. But if it's just ownable, but I can't use it to do something else, then I do not use it. Or if it's composable, let's say I can connect the API, but I don't own it, that also doesn't work, right? So you have to have both of them simultaneous to be true. And that's really, at the end of the day, to me, what Web3 is really all about.
I think that's a very good. Definition. One thing that I would put a little asterisk on, like owning, for me, is different from what we tend to think about ownership. Like it's more about control than it is about what does it mean to own a file. Like there's no deed for the file or any of that.
I see.
And so for me, it's more like, okay, what can I do with it? And that goes back to the programmability aspect that you just mentioned. So it's not like owning in the sense like, okay, I have a title that shows that I own it. It's like more, I'm in control of this. And there's stuff that is not ownable, but it's kind of collectively owned or collectively governed. And for me, protocols are exactly that. Like nobody owns HTTP, right? But there's a group of people that actually are collectively controlling or governing how it works. It's at the W3C, and that's kind of a fairly, I don't want to say opaque because they try to make it open, but it's still fairly opaque in how that works. Like most websites don't actually have any representation there. I do think that crypto brings us another opportunity here as well, which is the way to kind of collectively co-own these public goods, these open protocols that we all rely on. Like, okay, WebRTC, which is this video streaming core protocol, could be collectively governed by all of its application and users. And I don't know if this is what Riverside, the podcasting software that we use here, uses, but if it does, then they should have a say at the table of governance, along with Chrome, along with, Firefox, along with Apple, to say, yep, we want WebRTC to do XYZ, or we don't want this to be possible in that world. So I do think that crypto, yes, ownership, but it's kind of ownership in the governance world, more than ownership in like I can sell, something.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of property ownership in the abstract intellectual rights stuff is kind of in a little bit of a bastardization or overextension of a certain concept. But but like owning something is really about not only being able to do what you need to do, but also caring for it, right?
Yes,
if you own something, you're gonna take care of it, and I think that collective caretaking is something that it's hard to explain.
Yes, and I'm not sure this is if you're a native English speaker, but for me, one of the things when I say you own something, one thing that I hear is like, yes, that means that it's yours, but also that means that it's on you, right? It's your problem in some way. When you say, you own this, it's like, okay, that's your problem, and I think that's actually a very good analogy. It's not just about rights; it's also about responsibilities in some way. And so when you own the web, okay, you have rights over how it can work, but you also have responsibilities for how it can work and how it should work.
Yeah, and that's very different than this whole recent financialization of, like, for example, music rights. Oh, I own the music rights to the Bowie catalog or something like that. That's a very different type of ownership. Yes. And I can imagine the managers and the stuff, it's different, but once it becomes super financialized, we actually are losing that kind of symbiosis between rights and responsibility.
It becomes only speculative. It becomes only like, okay, I'm going to increase the value of it and then try to sell it to somebody else. And I think in many ways that reduces the value of the thing altogether. It makes it more of a speculative object more than it is something that is collectively useful and shared.
Yeah. Spinning on that concept of ownership, obviously you mentioned NFT being this kind of a this thing that you can hold on to and give you the kind of membership it belong. There's a lot of NFT kind of that are owned, right? They are traded. There's that people temporarily own something, flip it, and then they have some rights while they own it. They don't have it. What's your sense about like people understanding NFT? When you say to people NFT, I'm sure people think about like a picture, bored apes or something, a picture or JPEG or something like that.
Yeah.
You're saying something slightly more subtle. Can you give me like your understanding of people's current perception of NFT, and what do you mean by NFT being this kind of a necessary ingredient?
So I think for me, first of all, it's even I have trouble defining what an NFT is, because I think in practice, an NFT is an abstract concept. It's more like, what is a website? Well, a website is a website. It's like something that has a domain name. Maybe there's something there I can go to. It might be an e-commerce site. It might be a newspaper site. I think NFTs are kind of the same. It's more of there's NFT that are going to be collectible NFTs, the one that you mentioned, but there's already NFTs that are representing, domain names. A domain name is a non-fungible token. It's not, it doesn't have a monkey picture. The visual aspect actually is not that interesting. It might not be forever. We tend to think of like, oh, an NFT is forever. Like, not really. It's just it's a record in a database in practice, and the database actually happens to be on chain, but it's just a representation of an object. And so that in that way, it is very abstract. So ways of thinking about NFTs, I think is more, I think of them as, the way I try to explain people is like by giving them example and say, okay, this is an NFT. Domain name, ENS, that's an NFT. A liquidity position on Uniswap is an NFT, which is like, what is this? And it's like, it's basically an indication of what kind of money you've put in the system at what price. And it's kind of very specific to that use case. And again, nothing to do with collectibles. Game items are NFTs. So they might not be art stuff, but like, your sword in a game is an NFT. A diploma is an NFT. Your driver license should be an NFT. It's something that you earn, that you own, that you can show people like, hey, look, I have my driver license. I have a diploma from, you mentioned Colombia. It should be an NFT. Obviously in that scenario, it's not transferable. It's not bottable. I hope people don't buy the driver license. Otherwise we're in trouble on the roads. But it's also kinds of examples of NFTs.
It's possible not tradable. So I know some watch companies are like working on like digital warranty card that's NFT, but owning the NFT doesn't mean you own the watch.
No, exactly. So it might not be transferable. I actually think it in most NFTs will not be transferable. I actually think also most NFTs will not have a financial value. Like again, my driver license will never have a financial value. But think of a barcode, right? Something that's on an object, a barcode that identifies the object. It might not have a financial value, and yet it's a non-fungible token in the sense that it represents that unique book or that unique object that's on your table. It's a way to kind of do traceability because it was made in that country and then traveled through this supply chain to this point. It doesn't have a financial value. So really for me, an NFT is like a website or, a domain name, maybe something like an email address. It's kind of a core object of how we build stuff in this giant network that is the internet. And it can be used for very, very different purposes. We've obviously seen the collectible aspect and the monkey pictures and some of that. But I don't think we're nearly, we've nearly explored the realm of possibilities of what they can bring and how they're actually going to be used down the line.
Yeah. So, what's really interesting about NFT, my own personal history at NFT is that I have the privilege to work with Kevin McCoy, who's an inventor of NFT. If you go to Wikipedia, look up his name. I was his co-founder and CTO when we were trying to commercialize this idea of monograph. As a Bitcoin base, this predated Ethereum. So I had very early experience in the digital art space, making kind of payment system. And we end up using Stripe for the trading interface because that's all you had at the time. And Stripe at the time had pay with Bitcoin. So it was kind of like halfway of a OpenSea. But it was really early, and a lot of the people that work with me at Cardstack right now was part of that project. So we had this kind of collectible digital art, like precious objects, kind of like cultural thing, and to see like more like personal profile pic becoming the thing is helpful, but it's also very limiting. So I kind of want to switch the focus a little bit about your conception of NFT, especially related to membership NFT.
Yes.
So you talk about this idea that's not collectible, is more functional, and is not necessarily permanent, could be temporal, like you're members for a period of time. Tell me how that works and how people can acquire it. Is it something related to something that they already have, like a Bored Ape, or is it something that's independent of other NFT and other ecosystems?
Yeah, so basically the way we implemented it, and we're going to get technical, is like by creating contracts that are implementing the ERC 721 specification, so the base, the most frequent NFT specification. And what we've done is we've added a little difference to these NFTs. Generally, an NFT, if you think about a Bored Ape, it's really three things, right? It's an ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, usually sequential. Right. And if you've got Bored Ape 5, it's different from Bored Ape 7. An owner, it's usually the address of the wallet that actually owns it at any given point. And then a pointer to some metadata. And so for a Bored Ape, it's a pointer to the picture. It's a description of some of the characteristics of that specific ape. What we've added is a fourth field, which is a timestamp. And we said, you know what, that timestamp is the expiration. It's the time at which the NFT shouldn't be considered valid anymore. And so it's been timestamped like you have, everywhere in computer science, and say, okay, by adding this, we enable the NFTs to become a lot more things. So first of all, that means that I can acquire one, which is buy it from the contract. It gets minted. And then an expiration date is set, which means that at some point, if it has some benefits attached to this, once we pass the expiration date, well, these benefits are not usable anymore. Mm-hmm. It also brings the ability to bring what we call recurring revenue. It's the idea like, okay, if I want to keep having it, well, I can just pay to extend that expiration date by, a week, a month, a year, every week, every month, every year. And so that creates this whole thing that we're very familiar with, which is basically, recurring revenue. So my membership to Netflix right now is something that every month my card is charged and it's extended. And it's not an NFT, but it's a database it's a table and it's a row in the Netflix database that says Julien has an access to Netflix that is going to expire on June 20th, and it's going to get extended by another month, or etc. etc. So really, that's the thing we've added. That also meant that all of a sudden you could apply NFT concept to a lot of things. So you mentioned the diplomas. Diplomas are usually forever, but there's definitely a lot of industries in which you will want to have certification be renewed every month, every year.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a diploma, but like every year you can keep it up to date or prove that you've taken the lessons or the classes to stay on par with the art. And so that's one thing that you can do. Obviously, another thing that I think is really interesting is membership to clubs. You might be a member of a soccer club and you play with friends. You could have a little paper card to show people like, hey, look, this is me. Great. Not very practical. And if you want to have an online space as well, it's really hard to actually show this card. So if you move to the NFT world, you say, okay, these NFTs you pay, and now you're a member of the soccer club for like a month, for a year. And then that allows you to kind of access the venue to play soccer and maybe access some online places where you can share with your soccer friends about, the latest games and things like this.
Yeah.
Where really this is interesting to me is, again, this decoupling of the membership object, the NFT, from any specific application. Because let's take the soccer example. Now I can show up at, some sports store where they'll have gear and say, hey, you are a member of this soccer club? We have discount for these people. And it's done in a way that doesn't require them to know of my paper card. I can just show them the NFT. They know, their system knows that there's a deal with people from that special soccer club, and then I get a discount on jerseys or on balls that I might want to buy here.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So, the use case is like the consequences. Like if you have this, what is the thing that unlocks? Right. So looking at your website, which is by the way fantastic, it's so clear about the use cases. It can be in language that people understand. I know you're very technical and you're able to explain, and we just had a fairly technical discussion about how it's done. But the use case of membership is so vivid and things like that. But it's interesting to say, like let's say I have a members to a airline, like a award tier, like some platinum tier. I know intuitively it means a couple of things. If I walk into the lounge in an airport, I should be able to get in. So that's a real world consequence.
Yes.
If I go online, I should be able to book something that maybe other people can book or get a price that other people can't get. So it's like online, off-chain consequences. But I can also imagine that I can do something online, like mint something or transact in a certain way, or maybe I have the right to swap my points with people that other people don't have. The tier doesn't get that. So like, can explain to me like the real life on-chain, off-chain consequences. Do you have a preference for all? Do you expect Unlock Pro Code to support all of them? Where do you see?
Yeah, we do support all of them. And I want to mention, like the example that you described, people say, why do you need blockchain for this? In practice, you don't. Like what you described actually exists. Like, okay, I'm a member of Air France. I have the thing. I can show up at the lounge and I get access. I can show up, I can just get discount on the website.
It's quite nice.
Different airlines. But what's interesting here is like right now, it's really actually very hard for Air France to actually build a system where everywhere they have interactions with the customer is able to connect to a database that has this registration. It's actually really hard for them to build these things, and it's even harder for them to actually build with partners. They have a partnership with Hertz or with Avis, the car rental company. Well, right now, they have to actually interface the two information systems around, okay, when somebody shows up, you can verify that the code is right, and most of the time, it probably doesn't work. They just, you show a piece of paper that's, okay, I'll trust you, I guess it's the only way I can do that. But if it's actually in crypto, they don't need to build interoperable, information systems. They can actually create these partnerships because I can prove to them and they can verify on chain that yes, my NFT is a valid one from Air France that is from their contract and can show them. So really the blockchain here provides like the internet a way for everyone to actually access the content and interact and play with this. Where I think this goes further, and which is kind of interesting to me, is the idea that maybe at some point somebody was not affiliated with Air France, another business, say a restaurant in New York City, say, we'll give discounts to all the people that are from Air France. They don't have to actually have a call with Air France. They can say, we know their contract, we can just verify the contract. And that's a way to do marketing. That's a way for us to attract a special kind of people to our business because we know the characteristic of these people and we'll give them discounts on that. For me, that's also something that is really interesting. And that's what Patrick on our team calls the multiplayer membership. It really is the idea that, okay, my membership exists, and then if I'm willing to show it to people, anyone in the world can actually change their behavior based on this. One example that people know in the US is AAA, the automotive club, I guess. Yes. I'm not a member, but I know that there's a bunch of motels all around the US that will get you a discount or free coffee for lunch or something like this.
Right.
If you show them
special
you have the
rate,
special rates. If you have the AAA, they don't actually have a formal relationship with AAA. They don't need to, right? They just say, hey, show me your AAA card. I can verify that it's a real one. Then I'll give you a discount. And that's a way for them to attract business from customers that are more likely to adhere to their the values and the culture of the specific business.
It's amazing how much that is a type of targeting, right? So if you think about AAA members who are on the road, they likely have an RV, right? That's why you will have AAA, right? It's kind of the correlation there. Like in cities, people don't know what it is. They have to find a way to. I think in New York City, the AAA value is that we have our own DMV in our own office that's more efficient than the one over there, and that's their kind of city-based value. But in general, it's like, oh, you're in the middle of Montana, and they will get you, right?
Yes, they'll help you. And then if you go to the local motel, the local restaurant, you'll get a discount because you're a AAA member.
Exactly.
For me, that's the power of these memberships once they become multiplayer in that way.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting about this whole competitive coupon thing. Like I want to target my competitor customers. Can imagine like an upstart airline in France targeting Air France Platinum members. Say, hey, our business class is cash fare half the price. We depart every morning, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that for me is really thinking that the membership itself becomes more valuable once the competitor offers me benefits.
Oh, yeah.
If I have this tier of Air France and I know it gives me discount at these other competitors, I'm definitely going to get the tier. So I'm going to try to spend with Air France to get the tier and then also go use the other one. So it makes the membership even more valuable for the brand because it's becoming the standard. It becomes the thing that everybody wants to have because it gets them discount all around the world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that Amex, with Platinum has been able to do. It's exactly that. It's like, okay, how can we make it so that it's so attractive that people will want to be part of this because they can get other benefits that we don't care about.
Yeah. It was really interesting about it. We were thinking about, actually a couple of years ago, we were approached by International Travel Association to help them think through how to use blockchain to glue the systems of the different airlines together. And we kind of help them, advise them, say, hey, here's how you would do this. And I learned a lot about the kind of the airline mile system. I shit you not, excuse my French. Someone will be on one computer typing minus 3,000 and go into another computer and say plus 3,000, right?
I'm sure.
This is actually what happens when you say it would take 24 hours to 48 hours for your point to transfer. Someone needs to do that. And then you guess what the problem was? Fraud. Someone was like, minus 3,000 plus 150 and then 500 to my friends and 10,000. Yeah. Like that happens. So there needs to be reconciliation to make sure that the person who's doing this manual thing is not taking some money off the table.
And it's also incredibly expensive. You think about a system like this, it doesn't make any sense to actually pay someone to type numbers on two machines, right? Like it's kind of lame and it's very inefficient in many ways. And so that's one of the benefits of using these blockchain technologies. Yes.
Yeah, and it does make sense for that to leverage the whole global infrastructure that's right there, that's decentralized. I think when a few years ago, it was very much about private blockchain, and now with app chains and roll-ups and stuff like that, we're starting to blur the boundaries, and it's okay. You're going to get the performance in that kind of control, but also the fact that it's trusted and settled on something that someone can just like go and edit it and stuff like that. I want to kind of drill down a little bit on your idea of the web moving to a more subscription approach and Web3 beginning to have enough of the logic. And like, for example, stablecoin becomes a little bit easier to understand for people. People don't know what USD is, especially if your country has a volatile currency. Yep. Sometimes I think people who are in places where the currency is pretty strong don't understand how much anxiety there is to those currencies. And USDC and other things are pretty good. What is your sense of like the ability for people to buy into this stuff? Like, what is the friction right now for someone who has not used Web3 to say, I would like to buy this membership? Is it something you can use a credit card, Apple Pay?
Yes.
What is your sense of that?
Yeah, so definitely. So the way, I shared something with a few friends this morning, say, hey, if you think about blockchain as payment, you're getting only half of it. Like the payment is part of it, but the shared infrastructure is the bigger part. And going back to what you said earlier, ownable and composable. So yes, the way we think about Unlock is like, okay, this is a membership protocol. It's not about the payment. So we want to make it easy for people to say, hey, I will pay with Apple Pay, with Google Pay, with credit card. I don't have my own wallet yet. So we actually have the concept of Unlock accounts. You can email password and we'll basically create an identity for you, which is a hash of, something that looks like an address. And then we'll attach NFTs to this. And then since you can authenticate with us, we can say, okay, we, as intermediate here, we have to be here because that person doesn't have their wallet. We will assert that this person has this specific NFT, and there's actually an NFT on chain. In that scenario, yes, you pay with your card, you pay with Apple Pay, Google Pay. What we've built is a system where if you want to take if at some point you decide to have your own wallet, whether it's MetaMask we mentioned earlier or any of the other ones, you can come and say, hey, now I have my own wallet, please transfer these NFTs to my wallet. And we actually are building the infrastructure. We have an infrastructure to do this. We're improving it a lot so that you can actually take over these memberships. So the way we think about this is, graceful upgrades in a way that, okay, you start with something that is very Web2-like, even though I hate saying Web2, but like something that you're very familiar with, email, password, and then pay with card, nothing fancy. And then we tell you, hey, you could get more benefits of that by having your own wallet, by downloading these things, by paying with your own currencies, your own cryptocurrencies to actually get these things. And by the way, if you do that, you don't have to trust us. You don't have to rely on us being kind of a benevolent dictator in the middle, because you don't want that. In practice, you want to live in a world where you are, in control of your assets, and these assets don't have to be your home, but like your, access to your website, so that if you lose them, you can't lose them basically, so that the website cannot shut you down, and you can actually move to a world where it's more decentralized in that way, and there's no person in the middle that actually decides, nope, you can access or you cannot access that content.
Yeah, it's really nice, to have this experience that starts out familiar, and then there is this like, hey, take off the training wheels, and you're actually on your own. But you don't have to do that in the beginning, right? I never learned how to snowboard because there's no training wheel for snowboard. They're just falling on your ass 1,000 times, and I just refused to go through that. I know how to ski, but it was really difficult for me to get through that.
That's a very good point. And honestly, it's something that always kind of bugs me in the space. Like, oh, you have to start by downloading a wallet. It's like, to do something that I'm able to do in the Web 2 world again, I have first to do something that I don't really understand how that works, and do this seed phrase and do all of that complicated stuff before, being able to actually do the NFT stuff. Feels like, no, I should be able to kind of do the NFT first and then move to the world. It's like, okay, now I can take over. And if I want to sell that NFT to somebody else, then I need to transfer it to my wallet, and then I'm going to be able to sell it. For me, that's this graceful upgrade path. One thing that I think a lot about, and again, I think we're roughly the same generation, but like if you go back 25 years, very few people had email addresses. Like now everyone has an email address, because that's how you authenticate with most websites. Like and it's like, oh, I'm just going to put my email address. But there was a point where people didn't have email addresses, and so it was really, really hard to actually kind of kickstart the loop. Like, okay, do we have to, and many applications were giving you an email address. Like even at some point, Facebook gave you an email address. People don't know that, but you could have at some point at facebook.com, because it was a way to get people to actually be able to use Facebook, because otherwise, if they didn't have an email address, they couldn't actually have an account. So you would have to start with like, okay, put a login, a username, and a password, and then the recovery mechanism was outrageously bad, because there was actually no way to actually authenticate you on the other side. So you could upload your ID and stuff like this, which is kind of crazy. And so I think we're roughly at that place in the Web3 space. Like, can we make it easier? And again, providing these wallets to people so that they can onboard the Web3 experience, until everyone, like we do now, has an email address, until everyone has a wallet of their own. And that wallet might not look like MetaMask. One of my big beliefs is like, at some point, maybe your Google account is going to be a wallet. You don't know this, but it will be a wallet. Maybe your, Twitter account might be a wallet. Maybe your Instagram or your Facebook Meta ID, I guess, is going to be a wallet. You will not know about this, but it's going to have some kind of, maybe not a private key, but at least an address that matches your account and your account uniquely, that allows you to kind of onboard this, and then you'll be able to use everywhere else on the web after that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think this idea that the seed phrase or the actual cryptography bits, it can be different, places. So you can use different ways to do it. And, I look at the Ethereum space in this transition right now. We had the merge last year, which is moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And this worked out really well. As engineers, I'm amazed. I was up that night looking at the Panda coming out on the console. It's like, wow, this is some great engineering here. It's like literally replacing the engine of a Boeing 787 in flight.
On flight, yes. and not losing altitude, which is kind of like crazy.
It's totally like insane. I am so impressed. I mean, I don't think we're going to look back in that moment and have too many people remember it, but it's going to be looked back as a huge kind of engineering achievement. But the slightly less sexy phrase that wasn't in the merge, search, purge, verge vernacular is account abstraction.
Yes.
There is no worse word than that.
I'd say soulbound tokens is not better, but yes, go ahead.
So my understanding, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is that with account abstraction, you have a smart contract that is a wallet on chain, and that can be controlled by one or more keys. And those keys can be what's in MetaMask. It could be what is held by a kind of like a benevolent partner in some cases, or Starbucks if they end up doing that. But you can take that key over and without changing the history of that account or that smart contract based account. So it's not tied to this cryptography, and you can kind of swap out your key. Or it's more like a lock that has a program code, and you just change the code, but it's still the same lock. What's your thinking of that? Is that important? Is that something we want to migrate? It's a very small portion. Smart contract wallet like Gnosis Safe on Ethereum and Ethereum related ways. It's very, very small. Do you see that becoming a thing?
Yes and no. So I used to think that it actually was a solution. One thing that I realized more and more, and I've spoken with people that are at Argent, at Gnosis and others.
Yes.
There's big limitation with that approach. It's single chain. And we will not go back to a world where there's just only one chain or even one execution environment. Like, right now, if I deploy my Argent on a network, it's a different address on a different network. Or it might not actually exist on a different network, and there's no way to actually guarantee that it's going to be deployed at that address. Even though there's people that are using Create2 and mechanisms to try to make that work, it is really hard. There was actually a big hack last summer, not because of Argent, but because of the fact that a wallet, Gnosis Safe, was deployed on mainnet, and it was not deployed on Optimism, and the address on Optimism was getting money, and so people actually deployed a lot of different wallets to actually get to a point where that address existed, and they were able to steal some funds. So my belief is that, yes, we will move away from your identity is your private key, because this is incredibly risky and this is incredibly, broken, and we need to have some kind of level of interaction between your private key and your actual identity. And so the smart contract idea was a good one. It was that level, like multiple private keys could control one single contract, which is my real identity. And so maybe I've got, limitation of like the kind of transaction I can do from my phone, from the desktop. I need to factor off. Maybe you have a way to recover me on my wallet because you're one of these abstractions on that smart contract. The problem is like it's single chain. One approach that I'm more and more a fan of is really the idea of MPC. So like basically having, and it's kind of the same idea. It's like having multiple signers generate a signed transaction that represents my identity on chain. And so examples of this, I think there's Zengo is a wallet. Coinbase actually does this on the native wallet. There's a project used to be called Taurus, that actually has, apparently, even though it's pretty opaque, a similar function. I do think that's account abstraction in the sense that it's not a single private key. It is multiple signers that allow me to generate that identity. The challenge at this point is like both Zengo, Coinbase, and others. They're still pretty opaque in terms of like who these signers are. In an ideal world, that system would exist where my computer, my phone, my wife's computer are all signers on this in a way that would make it so that if one of them is lost, I can still access and I can still do business as usual. But at least I know these things are not going to collude against me. Right now, if I have to trust Zengo, and I know the people there, they're good people, but it's like everybody else, you don't want to trust them, or I don't want to trust Coinbase, or I don't want to trust Taurus or any of these systems, then you end up in a situation where you don't really have the right model. The benefit of that, though, is like if these transactions are signed away from any chain, and the identity, it's not like there's a private key, but like there is a public, not a public key, but there's an address that is the same across all networks. So my identity is the same everywhere, but I don't have the kind of the single point of failure, which is the private key in that scenario.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think that the smart contract wallet requires some state on each chain, and that create a tax in some way. When we were first exploring this, there's two approach. One is like the Nosa Safe approach. The other one is a Zengo approach, which is that. But one idea that we have, and it obviously requires coordination that currently doesn't exist, is for Google to be an MPC signer, for Apple to be an MPC signer,
exactly,
right? For Netflix to be a Netflix. I mean, they have
for the U.S. government to be an NPC signer. Like it's like for each state to be a different NPC signer. Like my driver license is signed by the state and maybe by some other entities, and I know it's my wallet and it's me. It's like I do think that's probably in my mind a much better model than when a single entity offers you your identity, a single provider offers you your identity, or one that was like I'm alone in charge, which again works well for advanced users like you and I, and obviously people should use hardware wallets for that kind of thing.
Yes.
But it's also kind of fairly complicated and probably like Linux on the desktop, right? It's like some of us do it, most people won't.
Yes. The Linux on the desktop is using like a new game machine running Linux as their own thing. And one of our developer migrated his entire server from to like a box. It's like this stuff is powerful. It's pretty amazing. No, I completely believe that MPC, by the way, stands for multi-party computation, is a way to essentially do public key private key cryptography where the private key part can be split into multiple things. It's kind of like 1 + 2 + 3, right? Like and then having that add up to 6 and then using 6 to create the private key as a number, right? That's not a prime number, bad example.
Whoever computes 1, 2. I mean, it's not in an ideal world, whoever computes 1, 2, and 3 are different people, and nobody can compute the 3 at once.
Exactly. And then the good thing about it is that you can, in some implementation, reshare the key, so you can pick new people and have the old people give it to new stuff. I applaud the Zengo team for doing a lot of the research and building a lot of libraries that a lot of people are building on. It's challenging to figure out what the business model would be, because the correct business model is for there to be a bunch of counterparty doing it as a service to their members, but not necessarily monetizable that way. So it's unclear how we can find incentive to make this type of NPC thing actually work in practice.
I think, I can't talk for Zengo or anyone, but I think one of the things that's amazing about wallets is like they also act as, in and outs of crypto. So they are exchanges, as a matter of fact. And
that's
so that
true.
means that they can take a cut on these transactions that are happening through their apps. I think that's how Zengo does it, at least for now. At some point, I hope, again, that's the Google and the Apples of the world. And I'm sure there's, subscription tools or SaaS businesses that they can do. Say, hey, okay, you'll pay us $5 a month or a year, whatever that is, for us to provide that service to you. And that it's a way to kind of reliably have your identity and not be stuck in any one scenario. In practice, they offer you email, right? And email is actually vastly more expensive than signing messages.
Oh, absolutely.
To run.
The storage and the polling and the fact that email infrastructure is no joke to run.
Exactly.
One of my fear is that the as with any protocol, as it gets more mature, it gets more complicated. The number of actual organization that has the resources to actually implement them becomes smaller and smaller. In the beginning, you can run your own email server. Nobody even dreams of that doing today. Do you think that the crypto infrastructure gets so complicated? In the beginning, it was just Bitcoin running some program on your computer, everything on your disk. Hopefully, you don't lose it. Congratulations if you kept it, but like, do you see that centralization as a unfortunate consequences of just complexity in the technology?
So I don't think it has to. I think it's a risk. I think it's definitely one of the risks that we're seeing. I'm really interested about the approach like what are the box like DAppNode and a bunch of others are doing. It's like little box that are acting as kind of a media server and or providing kind of this RPC endpoints in your home. I think that's what I'm advocating for. I hope at some point, I mentioned earlier I'm on Fios. I hope at some point the Verizon box will come with a node in it. And honestly, it is their interest. Like if there is a type of company that has been, I don't want to say screwed, but like that has lost their edge in the internet revolution, is the telcos, is the information providers. Like they're completely absent of the upper stack. And so saying, hey, we'll go back to this and we'll have, they could have done this a long time ago, but like maybe not email server, but like, a node running into each of these. that could be a thing, and that thing is connected the whole time. I think again, I think it would make sense for these companies to actually operate these things. Back in, it was like 10, 15 years ago in Europe, there was this thing called FON, F-O-N, which was really interesting. It was kind of they were selling boxes, kind of regular modems, and you put them home. And then what they was doing is basically offering Wi-Fi. So you'd have Wi-Fi in your home, but it also had like a public SSID that people could connect to and pay. And basically, if your endpoint was generating, revenue for the company, you would get credits to go when you travel around, connect to Wi-Fi hotspots for free because they were basically just swapping one for another. And I think that kind of idea took a little bit off. Most providers now do that in Europe. I don't know if in the US it's the same, but I think it's the same. Like if you see all of these networks you can connect to, not Verizon, but like some of the cable ones, because you're a member, you can connect to a Wi-Fi from a similar box and all.
Yeah.
So that kind of idea shows to me that at least some people understand that it could build something like this, because what we're discussing here is kind of a similar idea.
Yeah, and I think at the decentralized, I think the DPIN is the new acronym that's been floating around, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, right? So actually thinking about the physical infrastructure, these cable boxes being one of them, as another aspects of the expansion, and it actually makes sense. Like we think about Verizon, is a US company, they missed a lot, but they end up buying a bunch of media property, and that wasn't really smart, right?
No,
but there are smart things to do, and hopefully the strategy people, which by the way I've worked in corporate strategy in big companies, they're good people with just a lot of not very clueful people around them to convince. But if you look at what Visa is doing, how forward-looking they are, it is possible that within these organizations and the resources and market positioning to make this happen. We just hope that there is a person who speaks our language that works at Verizon.
Yeah,
today.
and what I find fascinating is like, if you think about these like Verizon and you mean the telcos and Visa.
Yes.
These are a lot of companies that have lost kind of the Web 1 and Web 2 wars. In some way, it can be relevant. Like you mentioned Stripe earlier, Apple Pay, Google Pay. They're all eating, on Visa and Amex and MasterCard's, closed gardens. And so it's interesting to see these companies like realize, hey, wait, this is our business that they're actually taking and slowly taking from us. So what if, because we can provide some infrastructure, what if we were actually upfront and kind of sandwich attack in some way, Apple, Google, and Amazon in that world? I think that'd be interesting.
I think it's true. And it's the first time in about 10 years that the actual stronghold of the big tech companies seems weaker than before, right?
Yes.
It is strong, the same way newspaper was strongest before they disappeared. Sometimes that kind of supernova brightest before it blows up. I'm not saying that iPhones are not going to be around forever, but I see a glimpse on the possibility of a change, of a win.
At least I don't want iPhone to disappear. So I actually don't have an iPhone, but I don't want iPhones to disappear or Google to disappear. I just want the checks and balances. I want this ecosystem to be healthier by not having a small number of people fully in charge of everything that we use and do online.
And it would be really, really amazing that when you're number one, you want to be closed and keep control of your number two, you want to be open. And hopefully there's enough people feeling that in number two, they're going to embrace the open standard and open technology and the open state that exists in the blockchain ecosystem. It would be great to champion that stuff. But honestly, the work needs to be done to solve some of these technical problems and explain it.
I mean, we've seen, and I'm smiling as I say this, but like we've seen Facebook do a lot of work on the crypto front. Like whatever you think of Libra and others, this was pretty poorly executed. But I think the idea behind was interesting. It's like, hey, we need to be able to kind of embrace these new technologies. I'm not a huge fan of what they do on the metaverse. I actually don't know what the metaverse is, but I think it's actually interesting to see them try to innovate and go further. I can't say as much for Google. It looks like in many ways they're like, who cares? We're in our position. And Apple is also like that. And to me, that's a bit frustrating to see these companies that should be at the forefront of some of these things just say, not my business. When in practice, it is actually pretty interesting and something that they should embrace in many ways.
Yeah, and the thing about it is the progress is forward, and it's not linear, right? So yes. Innovation and things, and we work very hard on our side on one problem for a long time. Sometimes hard tech is just like this, right? But the adoption comes from a need to either differentiate. Sometimes it comes from a yearning from your customer, and I think I've been following tech for a long time. It's probably the most stagnant. I don't look at SaaS as like exciting. I don't look at even blockchain as being particularly exciting, but there is something brewing there if we apply correctly. There's some really good primitive here.
Yes, absolutely.
So, well, it's been a really great conversation. We cover a lot of things, both specifically about the product of the Unlock and what it means, but also the need for us as technologists and as people builders to point and know what direction you're going. Keep moving towards it, and when the opportunity opens up, bring the user in and share that opportunity with everybody.
Absolutely. It's been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it. I know we went a bit over time, but I think it was because it was interesting.
No, this is totally worth it, and I really appreciate your insight and your honesty. It's really easy to just repeat the talking points, but we have to reflect bull market, bear market, progress or regression. It's all because people can have honest conversation and learn. And if we can make it 1% better every day, it seems like what you're doing on your marketing and the user explanation front, and it shows, right? Like every single time I go to your website, it's just clearer than the day before. And
thank you for saying this. I really appreciate it, and I want to just transfer that to the team, because we have a small team but a very mighty team that's working hard on this. So I really appreciate you saying this.
It's really awesome, and I love the practicality of bringing user on board and getting them feel successful. I think there's a little bit of a gap of like, hey, I'm gonna learn how to play the violin, and you suck for a long time until you get a little bit good, and that you've lost most people. And I think being able to get them to feel what ownership looks like, what this kind of the new substrate and this new capability looks like, is really fantastic. And you demonstrated that in a concrete way to a new group of people.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your kind words.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your time today. And as always, the community, I thank you for your time and attention. Until next time, take care.